That too.
So if anyone is interested, there are still some copies of the executive summary over there. We also have a few copies of the presentation itself. We didn't do a lot of them. Are going to show the presentation too, but if you do want to follow along and look, you are welcome to. Thank you for showing up tonight. This is a pretty good turnout. Pleasant surprise, actually. This is great. So you're here tonight to learn about the conservation and development. You're here because you are Deep River residents who clearly care very much, and we really appreciate you taking the time out of your Wednesday night. So should we get started? Should we give people a couple more?
We should do it.
Yeah.
All right. I'm Marion Stay, and I'm the chairman of the subcommittee. We have to call the meeting.
Miriam, just speak up. It's hard to hear you.
Oh,
That's Michael.
I thought I was loud. Anyway, I'm Marion Stay. I'm the chairman of the subcommittee. We have to call the meeting formally to order, which I'm going to do right now, although the members are scattered about, so I'm not going to do a roll call. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, actually, does everyone that is here from the committee tonight just want to get a quick wave so we can see all the great people and everyone up here?
And I just want to say, after the presentation, we're pretty much going to listen to what we have to say.
Yeah. So the plan for tonight is to kind of give an overview of what the committee has been working on so far. We would like to try to go through everything first, and then answer questions. And if you have a question that pertains to a specific slide, we can always go back, but that we can at least cover everything. And we will make sure to leave room for all questions and comments, so. Are you? Okay, you're getting seated. I'll give everyone a moment. I want everyone to be comfortable. Should we move this outward?
I was gonna just mention that. But I'm not. Yeah, I'll do. Trying to make sure nobody's raising their hand because I can't see it on there.
Oh.
I sneak by.
We're gonna move it so that you guys can see it
I
too.
think we're locked. You guys mind moving down or that way? I want to make sure they can still see everybody over here too. I appreciate that.
Let's do this. Hi, so my name is Zoe Chatfield. I am an associate planner with Titan Planning and Policy Group. I have been working with this great committee to develop Deep River's next plan of conservation and development. I also am the zoning officer here in town, so if you ever need a zoning permit, you can talk to me. And you might have at some point gotten a letter from me saying that you're in violation of something, which is less fun, but that is also me. So, but tonight we're here to talk about plan of conservation and development. So I will not read everything on each slide, but all of this information is both available on the website and there's more details that you can get from me if you have questions about specific things. But the kind of big thing to know about the plan of conservation and development is that it is a 10-year advisory document, or an advisory document that needs to be renewed every 10 years. It's required by the state for every town to have a plan of conservation and development in place. And there's a lot of things that the state requires each town consider. You can see the list up here. A lot of it has to do with considering housing, particularly affordable housing, Health, recreation, social services, and health has to do with things like public health, the water supply, sewer systems, infrastructure. And yeah, I think the last bit sums it up: physical, social, economic, and governmental conditions in the town. If you're curious about the full language of the statute, it is cited at the bottom, and there is a handy link. So if you were to download this PDF, you could click through it. It is chapter 126 of the Connecticut General Statutes. Really well done. So here's where it starts to get more important for us. What does a POCD actually do? So besides the fact that it is required by the state, it also has benefits for at the state and federal levels. You usually need to have the POCD in place in order to receive certain funds, and it acts as kind of a roadmap for the future. So if somebody proposes something, particularly if you're looking at zoning regulations or review of municipal improvements, if it's something that is in the POCD, it's easier to make an argument for why we should or shouldn't have certain changes or certain, improvements, new development, sustaining old development, whatever it may be. The POCD is kind of a guide for that. So it's a guide for planning and for money and resources. So what has Deep River's process looked like so far? So this committee was assembled in
2 years ago.
2022 now, so it's been a long time coming to this point. And in that time, the committee has done both some internal reviews of existing both town and state level documents. So we reviewed the 2015 POCD, which is also online, and some of the themes from that last POCD do carry over, but there's a lot that is either new or has gotten into the more specific based on all of our conversations. One thing that's required is to kind of update the demographic profile. So looking at who's currently living in Deep River and what are our projected population statistics. So are we going to have an increase, a decrease? Deep River is projected to have a decrease in the overall population. So that's something that we have to look at and consider in how we do our planning. We also review the state conservation and development responsible growth principles. So just as all the towns have to do a POCD, the state also does a POCD. And the regional, so ours is called RiverCog, is kind of the shorthand for it, but there's regional councils of government that also have put together POCDs for different regions. We are part of RiverCog, so that includes Essex, Chester, Old Saybrook. And we reviewed existing town plans. So that means the current and past economic development plans, the affordable housing plan that was adopted, also the state requirement back in 2022. And some other past analyses that were done, including like the fire department did their own analysis of what their properties were going to be. So we wanted to make sure we incorporated all of that rich information that has already been done and the research that's been done into this planning document to try to represent the town as best that we can. And then in terms of external engagement, we have had meetings every Wednesday where at different times we would invite different stakeholders. So it would be people from different agencies or departments to talk about specific needs for those agencies and departments. So, you know, planning, zoning, economic development, housing, parks and recreation, all of the different things, emergency services. So we did that, but we've also taken input from residents and are doing this now because we know that you don't catch everybody first time. So we want more input from residents. So if this is the first time that you are learning about this or seeing this, do not fear. there's still time to give your input, and actually this is even more helpful at this point because we've done so much listening and kind of assembling and finding how to put these ideas together, that now that we have something together, it gives you something to react to. So there were 2 surveys that we did use as a reference point for starting. One was done at the beginning of this process by our committee. But the other was done by Advanced CT about a year prior. You can go ahead to the. So these are what they look like. You might have seen one or either or both of these at one point. So the POCD questionnaire was the one that we put out to the community members to respond to. It was a little more focused and specific, asking about what you would like to see in different parts of Deep River. And yes.
Could I ask you where? I never got any questionnaire.
So, when we first started this.
Yeah.
Well, so when we first started doing the POCD, we put out little flyers everywhere. So a lot of the restaurants had them, Adams had it. It's actually still available on the town's website. So there's a link to the survey if you go to the town's
I'm
website.
not into the website.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm old fashioned.
That's okay. You can also just write me directly, or like write it down and talk to me. So if you wanted to do it that way, you could. I think a lot of the outreach was, because it is an online form, but we still will absolutely take it in a written fashion and incorporate it. But this was from 2023, so last year, and it has been up. So every once in a while, we have gotten some newer submissions. And the other one was Advanced CT. So this was a different organization, but they surveyed both residents and business owners in town and asked a lot of questions about what people want to see, where, and some more specific questions that were helpful in informing the POCD, including, questions about schools, about properties that have been empty for a while, what would people prefer to see there? So that's all been helpful as it's starting.
Sorry, I'm right thinking of it too.
Sorry.
Next one.
But as I said, we know that you will not all have participated in those other surveys. So please do not hesitate to reach out to submit in writing, whether it's physically or via email to me, to the committee. We are here because we want feedback and we want thoughts. Yes.
Does Adams have some surveys there now?
It was just a little flyer so you could.
Do they
scan
have
it.
them now? So if we wanted to go and get some, would they be at Adams?
So no, at the moment, so I'm gonna
Work?
Yep, I was gonna say, after his comment, I think we're gonna make a bunch of paper copies, so. this is
Okay,
a
you'd
good
be
comment.
putting them in Adams?
I'll probably put them in Adams and there'll be some here at the town hall.
What's the time frame on that? So we know when to go?
You gotta give me a couple of days to make them.
Okay, so within a week.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And my email is down there, but it's just,
Go back.
so yeah, well, it'll be at the end too, but you can email me at the zoning email. It's also can be found on the website, but I also am in this town hall, so you can here too. The community vision. So the first kind of major thing that the committee did was to write a vision for what they would like to see, what we would like to see, and what hopefully you would also like to see in Deep River over the next 10 years. This part I think I will actually just read for everyone because it does kind of set the tone of the stage for everything else that's to come. So the Deep River Planning and Zoning Commission, in developing this update to the 2015 Plan of Conservation and Development, is guided by an interest in protecting and enhancing the community, cultural, historic, recreational, and natural resources of Deep River, and by the interest in promoting activities and policies that will create a more vibrant, diverse, welcoming, sustainable, and livable community. At the center of a multi-town region, including Essex and Chester,
Deep River has long retained an informal, welcoming character that has fostered multiple generations of residents and businesses, as well as a wide variety of landscapes and opportunities. This plan seeks to reinforce and protect these critical opportunities, as well as enhance Deep River's position as the center of a multi-town area moving forward. We envision a Deep River that forms the economic, educational, housing, cultural, recreational, and civic hub of the Lower River Valley. So.
So one thing that we wanted to also point out as a big guiding framework for this, and unfortunately, the chair is not here tonight, but a big shout out to Sustainable Committee.
Is the Sustainable Connecticut
Sustainability Concepts in Action. So Sustainable Connecticut is an organization, a statewide organization that provides funding and also a lot of different toolkits for thinking about how we can plan for the future sustainable action. So that includes climate change and the environment, but also economic development and physical development and how those all work together to make a sustainable future.
So these are the 6 concepts in action that
are listed. There's a lot under each of them. So if you are interested in learning more about those, once again, this is a hyperlink that will show you all of the details. And if you are interested in that, I can also send it to you directly. You can email me. But this also served as an important framework for how we viewed the plan goals. And as of, I think last month, Deep River got its silver certification from Sustainable Connecticut. So it's already doing a lot to enact these concepts. So.
Okay, so we have 6 focus areas in this plan. We looked at municipal facilities and services, so looking at the town and the services we provide either directly or through partnerships with other agencies. Housing, transportation and infrastructure, economic development, natural resources and conservation, and then climate change and resiliency. An important thing for us as we were doing this was how much all of these focus areas really are interconnected. So even though they are in different categories, a lot of them have really important overlap. And so we can touch on some of that as well. And part of that overlap goes into the overarching goals and themes. So these are things that across all focus areas were things that arose as being important for the future of Deep River and how we are approaching all of these goals. So preserving the historic, cultural, and natural resources of Deep River, improving municipal systems, increasing public education, information, and outreach across focus areas. So trying to do more of this and improving all of the methods in which we can get information out there in town. Engaging regional and state partnerships, balancing economic development and housing goals with environmental conservation goals. So that's a really big one that's been an ongoing conversation as we look at housing and economic development, as well as natural resources and conservation and climate change and resiliency. And to ensure equity, inclusion, and accessibility throughout all town facilities, resources, and opportunities. So a quick note on the POCD structure. So it is still in draft form. It is not complete, so we are coming to you early. It is not, eventually you will have a full draft to look at, and there will be a public hearing at that point where you would then still have even more opportunities to give feedback before anything is adopted by the town. But we are, as we are still deliberating and doing this is the general structure. So we had focus areas. Within each focus area, we have goals, and within each goal, we set more specific action items in order to give options and be a more direct roadmap for how to make goals happen. Sometimes people worry that when we write these big visions and goals that it's one thing to say it and it's another to get there. So the goal with that is to have a menu of actions to choose from, or consider as ways to get to that ultimate vision for the future. So here's the first one. I'm not gonna read through everything, but I'll just give an overview, and it's all also in the executive summary. And the reason I'm not gonna go through all of it with each thing is so that we can get to questions faster, and then we can always go back and talk about it in real time. So the first area is with municipal facilities and services. With that, we looked a lot about internal administration, and how services are provided to residents and how some services or internal processes could be improved. We also talked to all of the key emergency services agencies, so the Ambulance Association, fire, police, and noted some important overlaps in some of their needs, which included more access to training space, which is why one idea that kind of arose from that was the development of a public safety complex or more dedicated spaces to municipal facilities. And yeah, and the last thing was really looking at what facilities we have, what facilities we think we could use, or just thinking about buildings and spaces in general, better or more community gathering spaces, areas for recreation. So we thought about all these different services that the town provides and what might look better or could be improved on in the future. Housing, it's a big one. So this was partially guided by the 2022 affordable housing plan that the town adopted. As I stated before, I want to say it again, was something that the state required every town to adopt. But really the big things that we also looked at in terms of housing in town is considering the current population and predicting what housing needs are going to look like based on that. So one thing is you have folks that have their kids growing up and maybe their kids want to come back to town and don't necessarily have an easy spot to live in because it's only one or two different types of housing types available. Where there's folks who don't want to downsize and want to stay in their homes, or do want to downsize and don't have a downsizing option. So we're thinking about aging in place, thinking about empty nesters, because those are two trends that we do see based on the demographic data. And the final thing is thinking about how the town can take some leadership in housing planning so that, you know, something that sometimes happens is a developer comes in and people aren't happy with it. And so if we actually work on our regulations and work on our end to try to facilitate it better, and we can then have more control of that outcome. So just thinking through how to make housing that benefits everyone. Transportation and infrastructure. So we thought about both car infrastructure, the roads, the sidewalks, better or more parking in downtown Main Street area. But we also thought about bike lanes, about the current bus system. So we looked at all of those different elements of transportation. And with infrastructure, we thought about the current sewer system and waste management, stormwater. And those things you'll see come up again as we think about climate change and resiliency as well. Economic development. Okay. So with this, we talked a lot with our Economic Development Commission. We talked with I don't know how many different commissions now, but we had several conversations about economic development. And we talked about how we wanted to, you know, bring in business into town, but also that it needs to be something that people actually want to see in town. The advanced CT survey was actually has some good insights into that in terms of the types of businesses residents and
had said that they would prefer. But a big piece of this was thinking about, how we, better brand the town, market the town, make it somewhere that people want to walk down Main Street and shop. But on the other side of that, how we balance that with our other climate and environmental goals. Speaking of. So natural resources and conservation, we looked at all of our current resources. We've looked at water, air, our current forests and tree health. And part of the actions that we have underneath these goals is looking more specifically at how to protect or maintain the current resource that we do have, and also how to better protect them moving forward. Sure. Oh, and the other big thing here was conversations with the land trust about their vision for open space acquisition and protecting open space. So that was an important part of this section discussion. And last but not least, climate change resiliency. So this, even though it's last, actually ties in all of those sustainable Connecticut themes and links back up through a lot of the other focus areas in terms of how we think about development so that it's sustainable. How do we encourage development that uses better practices, and how do we also plan with infrastructure that considers things like increased storm hazards, flooding. So this looks at both the natural and built environments and how we can better plan moving forward as the climate does change. So what are the next steps? The committee will continue to meet on Wednesdays once a month at 6 p.m. Right? Well, not right here actually, but in the town hall downstairs. It is open to the public. The agendas are posted online and everything is recorded. So if you ever are interested in either joining a conversation or just seeing what was talked about, all of that is available. As I said, we're still actively in the process of deliberating and taking all these goals and conversations and actions and making sure that it really represents the vision that we want to set for the town for the next 10 years. The next step, kind of concurrently with the continued meetings, is collecting public feedback. So having presentations and conversations like this, and having more direct conversations with stakeholders present. So if you wanted to, if you have a community group that you want to have attend a POCD meeting and talk about things from your lens, you can reach out to us so that we can make sure it's part of our agenda, for example. So you can also just show up, but if you wanted to do it like that, you can let me know. So after all of that, after we've done the rest of our meetings, after we finish the draft and incorporated all the feedback that we can, we will release a complete draft of the document for everyone to review. There will be a public hearing where then everyone can come and give their final thoughts and feedback. And then if the general consensus is to adopt it, then we would the town would adopt the plan. Or if everyone is like, you know what, no, I agree, we need to change this, then we would go back, make the changes, then bring it back, and eventually it will be adopted in some form. So then it will be kind of the roadmap document for the next 10 years. And I will now open it up to all of you. And if you are interested in looking, I think we have one executive summary left, and we do have 3 of the actual PowerPoint presentation. You all see the next slide page, so I did not print enough things. So if you would like to look at it, go for it. And if you'd like to ask a question, I can bring you in. Would anyone else like to say anything? from the committee first, or?
I was gonna add one more thing. If you have read the executive summary and you're all done with it, if somebody else is interested, you could pass it to them. That'd be great.
Hi. Question for you.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the state mandates. And we have state mandates, are they listed as saying we have to do these things by the state? And whether there's a deadline that we should know about? And like the housing, because I've heard that there was some sort of deadline on the housing, that's a rumor, but I've never actually seen it in writing or anything. And my second question, actually two questions, for price of one. You mentioned stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders and what's their stake?
So the stakeholders are everybody. Like you're a stakeholder.
Okay,
And
okay, you're talking about
Yep.
regular townspeople. You made
Mhm.
it sound like somebody
Owners.
outside when you said stakeholders.
Oh, no, I
Townspeople.
yeah, so individual residents, but I guess by stakeholders, we also meant like groups. So the land trust, the different departments, so and commissions, so the Economic Development Commission, Sustainable Committee. So we met with different, and all of those people, all of those groups are made up of residents as well. They just are also kind of already gathered together for a specific purpose.
Did you find any type of conflict between what the state wants and what you envision the town wants?
that's always a trick question because the state does want you to do affordable housing. And everybody kind of agrees that we're in need of housing. We had a whole study done about housing. But it always ends up, we want it, we just don't want it here. So there's always that conflict. that
Or
we-
I think it's a real problem with like, with the housing
Mhm.
is economic opportunity in this area. Like my son, he would have liked to live in Deep River, but he had to move to Middletown
Yep.
because that's where the work was.
Yes.
And when he got over there and he found out that he got a job in Essex. But this is one of the driving things that has there really been an increase in the economies in the surrounding areas, which would be places for our children to get employed, to allow them to stay here? Otherwise, in other words, these are like the things of like what the town needs as opposed to what the state is envisioning without really tackling the problem of economic development.
So that scenario is exactly one that we thought it through as what, that is a real thing that you, and I'm sure there's other parents in here that have experienced something similar, that you have a college grad who wants to be back in the area and is struggling to find a place to live or a place to work that's nearby. So that is why housing and economic development is important in this plan. And we're thinking about exactly that kind of scenario.
Zoe,
Yes.
I think it's important to point out that with like the housing plan that we had completed in 2022, that there's ongoing work with that. It's in the P O C D, but we're not waiting until the P O C D finishes. There's committees working on it right now, same with economic development and some of the other committees. So some of these action items, we already have picked up some ground on. We have momentum going.
Yeah, the list of committees goes a lot longer than the three that I kept thinking of off the top of my head.
But it's important to note that we aren't waiting until this document's finished to say, oh, gosh, we need this, let's start to work on it. Work has already begun in a lot of these areas because of the state mandates, and because of our needs.
I was going to double down on that is economic development is also looking for ways to, how do we, everybody knows somebody who worked at Urarco and that's closed and now Smith and Wesson is closed. So they're still looking, how do we bring, that kind of work back to Deep River for people to live and work here? So it is being worked on. It's just, it's
One
hard.
justifies the other. We just had a talk over at the Historical Society where we had the economic development in Essex and how the business in Essex, the Ivory Factory, bloomed an entire housing market over in different parts of Essex and in southern Deep River for people to go to the factories. So it's exactly the same thing.
One other part of that question was, is there a deadline for the plan?
Oh, yes. So we are, our goal, which I think is back, and John raised his hand.
No, so I was just gonna jump in on that, but go ahead, Zoe. I'm happy to help if you need.
Oh, well, I just had on here, June of 2025 is when we have the goal of having it adopted, but John, you might know the more specifics of what are,
Sure. So, hi everyone. John Guskowski. I'm with Tyke Planning and Policy Group, and have also been a zoning officer along with Zoe, and worked on this plan. The state requires every municipality to update its plan at least every 10 years. June of 2015, or I think maybe a little bit later in 2015 was the last adoption date. If the town does not update its plan within that 10-year timeframe, it may become ineligible for state discretionary funds, and that can include open space funds or sidewalk grants or things like that the state, not mandatory payments to towns, but so the town could lose eligibility. So it's important that we update it. As Zoe said at the beginning, the state statutes require local plans to consider a number of things. Those are mandatory. We have to think about extension of sewer and water lines and affordable housing and network of streets and sidewalks and provision for open space and all of those things. Generally speaking, the plan has to consider them, but the state does not have, specific expectations of how each town will address those things. So it's, the state essentially requires you to have a certain table of contents, but doesn't require what the actual goals are in each chapter, if you can put it that way.
first and then I'll get back.
Mike, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you guys. You guys did a hell of a job, and I know it's all volunteer work, and you're not getting paid big money, and, you could see that you put a lot of detail effort. And I like just a couple thoughts, and you may not have an answer, but just for future addressing some of these concerns. Our waste treatment plant, as we move forward, obviously affordable housing wants to be, the perfect storm is to be on city sewer, city water. If I'm not mistaken, I've heard that we are already maxed out or close to being maxed out on our sewer system. If we move ahead with some of these cool opportunities, how does that affect taxpayers moving ahead if we have to dump millions of dollars into expanding that particular system to make it attractive for builders to come in and make more affordable housing units on that line? Another thing, Zoe, many people know my big beef has been the traffic concerns and problems on Main Street, backed up by DOT statistics. Where does that fall into that? And is that something that will be considered as we try to address developing a better village district? And then just quickly, this is a big menu. Moving ahead, there's a lot to digest there and to implement. Who's responsible for monitoring this and making sure that these things do happen according to the POC? POCD.
So that last question is an interesting one. Part of what is recommended would be having somebody that is dedicated to overseeing that, like a town planner. Currently, there is not somebody in that specific role.
That's a paid position.
Yes, that would be a town position. In theory, if the town wanted to decide on a management plan for it, it could be the continuation of some sort of committee. And part of those actions is also thinking about who would be leading on those actions, because not everyone is doing everything. So certain things, if it's a zoning regulation, it would be up to the Planning and Zoning Commission, while various things when it comes to economic development might be led by the Economic Development Committee, while other things, if it's an ordinance or budgetary, it might be Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance. So part of that is also identifying who within the town is appropriate to take the lead on it. But it's a good question.
So what we did for a little while for planning and zoning is we were going through the P O C D. And there was pretty much a checklist. And one of them was, the adoption of an open space fund, which were able to accomplish, got some funds, and we're actually able to purchase a piece of open space. But it doesn't always work that way. We did try to pass a delay of demolition. And we worked on that, got all the wording right, submitted it to the selectmen, and they didn't pass it. So there are things, you do have some of these things, they go forward and, they hit a roadblock. So. But your hope that each of these commissions have followed, like, I know Land Trust, one of their big things was to put together a world concept map. of the property that they were looking to obtain. So they have done. So you gotta rely on the people who are doing the volunteer work still, because there isn't a town planner.
So a town planner at some point, if we really wanna step up our game, is something for the town to consider.
Yep.
Otherwise, these things just sit on the shelf.
Yeah, and I would say, yeah, so part of it is about taking initiative on certain things. And the other thing that is helpful about having it in the document, though, is that if you do have somebody who wants to take initiative on one of, whether it's from a sustainability standpoint or an economic development standpoint or a housing standpoint, if it's in the document, then it's a really good supporting piece in order to get a grant funding or federal or state dollars to back it up. So yeah, it still takes somebody who will take the initiative to do it, but it's really useful when it's there.
I was gonna say, I think we identified a contract for somebody to be available to talk to DOT whenever they're doing a project or whatever. And I think we also identified that we weren't sure in terms of the sewer treatment plant, where it might be totally okay and have the capacity. Because we've heard various things, so.
I think one of the actions is to assess it as first, the first step is actually figuring out what is our current capacity and the quality is, so.
So that's not known at this point.
Is there a maximum capacity for this?
It's no,
Give them right to.
Well, I can answer some of that for you, having attended many of the board meetings. Right now, they're having haulage from other towns and entities, and we have a partnership with it. Chester is using our facility, so there is enough room, there is capacity, and what is up for consideration is, do you want to extend the lines in other parts of the town to give it, address other areas and other development. But at the moment, there is current capacity.
You may or may not know this, so I can double down on this. Do you know what the capacity is?
No, I don't. Peter, do you have any sense? Where's Peter? Do you have any sense of the capacity?
I'm told, I'm new on the commission, but I'm told you have excess capacity. As to what amount, I have no idea.
And I think that's kind of whatever.
But it's available. We just don't have it here tonight. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to know what you consider affordable housing. Obviously, that is a question. Like this man over here, he said his child cannot buy a house in Deep River. Well, the only way to do that is to bring the taxes down. Obviously, you're thinking you want to do it by getting in more manufacturing. But there again, I was looking at to build a house. The house would have cost me $350,000. And I'll be honest with you, it was a small 2-family house, 1 bedroom. How much would I have to ask for rent? Just to make the mortgage. I mean, we have to consider, and Chester's running into the same thing. What is affordable housing? 200, 300, 400,000?
big thing.
Well, there's two things to this. So I was gonna say, there's a house that just came for sale on Village Street. It's 600 square feet and it's $270,000. So I don't know if that's affordable to you, because it's not to me. A lot of the problem too is the building code. The building code has taken on the energy code. The things you have to do to build a home now are absolutely. And I always go back to, you have a house from the 1800s that's still standing and people still live in them. So it's a lot of that is gonna have to come from the state, where they go, look, the building code has gone way overboard, sorry. Where they're making you do things that that are making houses unaffordable. So I don't have a real answer for you.
I have to answer. Right.
You're in the
So-
building code?
Daniel's
No,
already
no, no.
at work.
Yeah, right. So affordable housing, as far as the state is concerned, right, is it deals with the medium income. And if you make a percentage less than medium income, so that's what they say, is there a house that somebody goes, so the medium income for Deep River right now is hovering around $80,000. Now, I'm not saying that that's what I make or anybody else, but that's what the state says our median income is for Deep River. So they're saying somebody who has 30% of that, so they're only making $25,000, they need to be able to afford a house. And then they have a formula that says they should only spend so much per month. So whatever their fee, then it gets down, it can only be, I'm just throwing these numbers out now, like $2,000 a month. So that's where it comes from, is this methodology that the state has. Now, there's also, we understand as citizens what affordable would mean, so that, my kid goes off to college and he wants to come back. There needs to be homes that are starter family homes, workers' homes, whatever we want to call them, that aren't $500,000 or $300,000. But that's more of a number that we subjectively would think about. That's the housing we like to see. A third element of that is, for example, Kirkland Commons. They have a 2-year waiting list, as I understand right now. So we need more of that type of housing, right? So we have a lot of people in our community that are aging. Within 10 years, we'll be 50% of our community. We don't have very many citizens that are between the ages of 20 and 40. And within 10 years, there'll be even less of those people, means less children. So we're trying to accommodate what our actual need is, yet keep the state's requirements or what they think we should have at bay. This has come up in meetings because there is legislation called 830G, and if the developers come in and they're like, hey, you have a need because you don't have enough of affordable housing by the measurement of the medium income, then we can't say no as a planning and zoning or a town. We would have to accept whatever that developer brought in. So this is all the more reason why we're being proactive, to be sure that we can provide that type of housing ourselves to fit our demographic and our needs, without having something that really is. Does that help?
Is there a number, Dan, for Deep River's demographic? As far as what is considered affordable housing? I mean, I know Greenwich is different than ours.
Yes, and it's actually in our, I believe it's in our affordable housing plan, but,
Is there a number to even know?
well, it's always, I want to say it's 84,000 was the last one. I think it's recently updated. It's gone up a little bit for what they consider our median income to be. So then the affordable housing then is 30.
Yeah, how does that translate to an actual sale price? Of somebody coming in and building it affordable?
So, all right, that gets, that gets pretty particular because it's subsidy based. So here's what we do know. Developers don't want to build that kind of housing unless they have sewer, because it
Lowers the.
yeah, right. And it basically isn't in their interest to put too many units in. So what we run into is somebody will come and put in 10 units or 20 units, and they put in, only 3 or 4 of the affordable houses that are units that are going to have a lower rent to meet that 30% AMI. But it throws off our numbers because it's skewed by having the additional 15 units in a structure like that. Then that means that our requirement say we have to have X number of units available by the state. Every time a developer does that, and they build, it's like 2 to 8 or 5 to 15, it makes us go down the hole in the wrong direction. That's one of the reasons why it fits us that we actually do have a need to accommodate people that may want assistance or just don't want to be alone, to have living like Kirkland Commons. If we build more of that, that automatically, because it's needed, and will not be lifted up based on subsidy. That takes care of, we swap that number, and if we can actually meet that number, which we may never be able to meet, but if we meet that number, then that takes away anything that would force us into a situation.
Right now, how many units do we need to satisfy the state above front of affordable housing?
I
Is
opened up,
there a number?
I mean, so this is, I went to the affordable housing plan, so it's a few years old now.
How many?
So the state,
So,
it's a couple years old now. The state has a more updated list that they keep. But based on at the time when the plan was written, Deep River was at 3%. And you need to be at 10%. So we were at 3% with 64 affordable units out of a total 2,096.
So how many, what's the,
64 out of 2096
96.
is what we currently have. But we're working on things to accommodate, it's in this plan.
Yeah, we talked about accessory dwelling.
Yeah, accessory dwelling units is a big one, because there are actually a lot of homes in the area where people already have a mother-in-law apartment, or as they call them, or they turn their garage in for their kids. I mean, probably a lot of people in this room already have that in their home, but it's not counted currently. So we want to make sure that where the community has made efforts to accommodate affordable housing, that those are documented.
does it make sense to offer tax incentives for,
I think that's also in the plan.
is.
That's also in the plan, yeah.
So like the plans on the website, the town website, you can dig into it and there are a series of easily 35 action steps to be taken, and the selectmen and P and Z are reviewing that now just to see what progress we've made in the last 2 years and to queue up the next set for action.
The key thing is we want to meet that, not only because we don't want the wrong thing for our town, but also we don't want municipal liability, which is the legislation that, that it could go that way. It says, hey, you should have, X number of units and you aren't providing it. Now then the town's on the hook. And I don't know how that would be processed, but we want to avoid any of those situations altogether. That's a bad one.
If I may add to that, only 29 out of the 169 towns in the state are actually at their goal of where they should be.
Yes.
So the whole state is struggling with this.
Right, and Deep River's never had a single D30G application. So I know Chester just had one, and it was a big to do, but Deep River's never actually had somebody come forward with that.
I want to add something, an observation that it appears that the main causes of all these problems is that inflation has been higher than the increase in income. That's what's, years ago, we could afford it. Now, I just Googled something up here, and the median income per capita in Deep River is 38,000, and the 73,000 is per household. So, but if you're talking about single person coming out on their own, it's impossible. And it's even impossible for them to get a rent, because even the rents are higher than the mortgage rents, mortgage rates in some. So this is a real problem, which it's we can do all this planning and everything, but I see something that there's got to be some way to cut down the expenses to compensate for the fact that the income is not increasing as fast as the expenses. The price of everything, you go to lumber and everything else. In the past 5 years, lumber's doubled. Everything doubled.
I have 2 questions. First one, if you could expand a bit on your vision statement. I was very interested in how at the end you said you see Deep River as being the hub of the lower Connecticut River Valley. And I think it's interesting because we are the practical hub between the Chester and Essex. But how do you see us being the whole hub?
So I think a lot of it was just considering that even if you're in Haddam, I mean, they don't really, I know they have a smaller grocery store, but they do come here. I mean, that is, and So I work in Madison, and what I hear now a lot of the time is people will come here, they go to Pandemonium, they drop the kids off there, and they'll go do shopping while their kids are at Pandemonium, and they like that because we're very walkable. So if the kids run out of stuff to do at Pandemonium, they use our sidewalks. And that, you know, we've kind of touched on that too, that we are missing some sidewalks, so that's another big part of our problem. But we're starting to get talked about outside of here. And I think, another thing that we don't recognize a lot of it is, I always pick on Pine Ledge, but if you do some research on Pine Ledge, people from all over the world actually talk about coming here to climb on Pine Ledge. So, you know, rock climbers come here to do that. So it's starting to get, you know, the buzz again. I'm not sure if that exactly covers what you're after, but it is starting to get talked about.
So it's aspirational for us,
Yeah.
but somewhat grounded in reality.
Yes.
My other question, I'm wondering, are you still recommending exploring the development of a public safety hub? Now that as a town, we've decided to go ahead with the fire station at its location.
I think so, because it doesn't, the new fire facility gets them their building and their, you know, they'll park their apparatus there and have office space, but I don't think it covers training. And that doesn't address the regional need for that. So I think we still should cover that.
Yeah, there were some overlaps, both for need for training space, and gathering spaces. I guess it all relates back to the training, and being able to have places for volunteers to go. That kind of was, yeah, heard from both fire and police, so. You know, I guess it was written before the new fire house, but, at this moment, yes, so part of it as an aspiration to have some sort of space that the emergency services folks express need for.
And actually, to expand on that a little bit, even if it's not specifically for just, you know, emergency services, I'll put it as a broad, it could also be, you know, an outside venue for something. So depending on what, you know, we come up with it for a concept or how that plays out, it could be multiple use. It doesn't just strictly have to be for training facilities.
Yeah, another theme that came up in conversations, that isn't maybe not touched on as specifically in the broader goals, but is in the leads, is about community gathering spaces and utilization of spaces for arts and culture. So thinking about all of those kind of enriching community things that we could invest in.
Keep in mind the investment, as you mentioned at the very beginning, sometimes money comes along. And if you have it in your P O C D, we may not be able to, we might not agree to decide to invest in building a recreational facility. But if opportunity came along where there was money to get an, you know, recreational facility, then it's a different matter to say, well, could we service that and maintain it? Well, yeah, that is something we could do. So there are some things in there that are a little bit more on the wish list. But you have to have them there. Otherwise, when the opportunity comes, you don't get to put your hand in. So.
I think just to expand on your comment too on that consolidated emergency services. It wasn't strictly about the fire department. It had to do with emergency services, which is covered somewhat in the sustainable CT study, which has to do with climate change, kind of emergency response, not just a fire, to rescue, police, and other community services. One of the reasons that it was a focus of the study was that there are significantly more state resources available for consolidated facilities, which there aren't for just a firehouse. So it had to do with available funding resources and also to bring up all emergency response, be it ambulance, police, fire, rescue, or more of a environmental or, you know, other emergency response. COVID, for instance, when you need to have a large facility for a pandemic, whatever, it covers all of those types of things. And the other perspective was it also looked at it from a regional perspective, if we begin to look at emergency response of shared resources and facilities, we don't have to bear the cost of everything by the townspeople. We share the resources with our butters, which is
Because the services are already shared.
they are already shared, right? But it does it in a planned way.
So we're paying for a firehouse, but the state of the feds might have paid for a joint center. What we're saying.
But now, from what I'm hearing, just putting all this together, we still may want the goal, take away the firehouse, but the rest of the emergency services may go that. It's a safety.
That's what the town wants.
Yep. There's still a need for that, and there's still a reason to look at that for a long range plan.
Anyone else? Anyone who has spoken yet? Would you like to have the mic or do you want to?
I can try to talk about enough. So I have some feedback on the economic development, and it's specifically, in my instance, it's for the Plattwood Industrial Park. So I very much support business development. I actually own a small business in that industrial park. However, I also live across the street. And I was hoping, when you compile your plan for economic development, maybe you can address light pollution and how it affects neighboring houses. Because right now there are parts on my property where I can't look toward the industrial park because the lights are so bright and they're shining up at a 45-degree angle. And I understand that, you know, the businesses need safety lights, but they don't need to be shining up. So maybe they put deflectors
Yeah,
so the lights shine down and not upward into the neighboring properties.
yeah, and there's dark sky standards that we can definitely make sure are part of those recommendations.
Okay, yeah, so
Yeah,
if you would just keep that in mind when you write your plan, how the lights on industrial buildings affect neighboring. Yes,
So could your PowerPoint presentation be made available?
it is already.
It is.
Yeah, so it's on the Planning and Zoning Commission website. I think it's also right now on the town hall's homepage, or at least it was to announce today's meeting. And on it, both this presentation and the executive summary are available, so that you can review it in a little bit more detail. And my email is on there as well, so that if you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, ideas, you can send them my way. And something that you might think as you're reading it, because they're just like the broader goals, so they don't name every single specific thing that might fall under them. You know, if you want to make sure that something is included, it might be, and it just isn't named in the broader goal, like even emergency services, you know, we didn't name every single thing in that broader goal, but it's all part of the action items. So if you want any more details on anything, I'm able to answer those questions as well. So until the draft is ready to see the light of day, it's still being worked on.
So when will I be able to see the open space part of it?
So the map.
Well, your guidelines for managing and
I thought I sent you a draft of that, no?
open space. Oh, is that complete now?
No, the final version, no, nothing is complete because we're
Okay.
taking feedback right here, right now,
But
but
it's that what I have now is substantially complete then?
yeah, it's the complete drafted section.
Okay.
I think I made sure to emphasize it was a draft though. I'm actually in the process right now of, because I've been taking committee member feedback in as well as some other stakeholder feedback. So because I think I did send you a draft, if you wanted to send me feedback based on what I did give you, that's something that right now I'm incorporating into this next draft. So, which is why I'm saying it's definitely not, the
Still a
final.
work in
Yeah,
progress.
exactly. But a work in progress in the sense that with what I did send you, feel free to send me comments on it. Because right now I'm actively incorporating in other comments. So,
So, Carol wanted to say something. So.
Oh, hi, guys. So this is Carol Jones. Sorry, can you hear me? Okay.
yes.
Yes, okay. So I didn't, there's no ability to raise my hand, so I wasn't sure when to jump in. I just had a few things. So I've been going to the WPCA meetings as well, and I asked that specific question a couple meetings ago, and they are at 80% capacity right now. Something like, I just was digging through my notes. So they bring in, they have the capacity for 225 million gallons a day. They're at 180. So if you do the math, that's 80%. With room for about another 250 single family units, the EDUs that they do, equivalent dwelling units. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. And I also wanted to, I don't know if it was Alan or Mike, I heard Mike say thank you to the group. And yes, this has been going on for years and a lot of work and effort went into this. So thank you so much.
Carol?
Yes.
We didn't hear the amount of
Oh.
the units.
Oh, okay. That works out to about 250 single family units. They still have capacity for.
Thank you.
They're at 80% capacity. Yep.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank
I
you.
just wrote that down.
I just. So did I.
Could you expand a bit on your thoughts on how you see Deep River being a public utility provider? We have the WPCA, and I'm curious about the other public utilities and how would that play out?
So a lot of, I'm gonna say I've thrown that out there more times than I care to count. So a lot of it is if you look at, like Wallingford Electric or Groton Public Utilities. So they run their own, their own power plant. And what they do is if there's, they share with Eversource. And if you generate enough electricity, you can sell back to Eversource. Or a lot of the time, if you fall short, you can, take from Eversource. So a lot of that stems from the fact that, we all pay extraordinary number for electricity from Eversource. And there is, talk about amongst legislators of, smaller places continuing to create, single public utilities. So the thought was we have easy availability of gas. You could always use a solar farm like we've kind of done up next to the dump. So it just stemmed from that. There's also the trash to energy plant that's in Plainfield. They just created that, and that seems to be working well. I know we've had plenty of talks about our transfer station and how we deal with that. So it just kind of stemmed from all that. There's not really a working plan for that yet, but I know if that was to happen here, that's also an opportunity for people to be employed in our town. So it could operate here and help employ people here. And cut cost, the top number. Sorry about that. That should have been number one. Else?
I would give every moment to still think, but I'll just reiterate again that both of the documents can be found online and do not hesitate to reach out to me with your thoughts if you think of something later. There is a lot of content to take in. That's part of why it's taken us a long time to get here is that we've had a lot of different conversations and multiple meetings on specific pieces of this plan. And the goal is to, set a vision that will benefit everyone in this room, so.
I actually wanted to thank you because you always think of the things that you do miss, and a paper copy of the questionnaire just never came to mind. So that's high on my priority list. Like I said, hopefully by the end of this week. You guys are good. We're, like you said, here. Yep. I was gonna say, we're always available on the first Wednesday of the month. Yeah, don't forget to close us out.
Yeah, no, we are, and you're obviously welcome to come. You're allowed to come. I was thinking too, we spent a lot of time on economic development. And we went back and forth on how specific we should be in a plan, because a lot of times plans are very, very general. And we're still kind of general, but we're trying to be a little bit more specific. And so that's the type of thing that input is really good. You want us to be more specific, you want us not to be. It's easier to be, I think, more or less specific with open space. You can just say, we want an open space. But with economic development, that one was pretty hard, and some of the other issues. So, I will.
Forget
say
we
that.
on that master plan with our.
If nobody has to comment. You can go. All right.
We go.
Adjourn.
See if I can find this.
About this thing, how was this starting with that note, like the, it's simply.
Very good.
Oh, okay.